soccer fan, sports fan, regardless, everybody was into that and everybody was like, whoa, this was awesome. A successful World Cup for the US, in my opinion, is getting out of the group. There is a lot of hype and expectations around this team, simply because there are a lot of young, talented players playing at clubs that Americans have never really played at before. However, they are flawed. They are not the most talented team in Qatar. You know, while the group is manageable, it's also a little bit dicey when you look at what the US is good at and what the other teams are good at. Getting out of the group, finishing second behind favorite England, and advancing to the round of 16 and playing a competitive match in the round of 16, I think that would be successful. Maybe some Americans back at home would disagree with that, but I think for this team at this point in time, considering they're probably going to be by far the youngest team in Qatar, I think that would be a good run at the World Cup. Prior to these last set of games ahead of the World Cup, where the US went to Europe and played a couple of friendlies against Japan and Saudi Arabia and looked frankly really poor, the expectations were pretty high. I think the minimum was, okay, we got to get out of the group and then we'll see what happens. I think among the harder core fans of the national team, they saw those September games and thought, uh-oh, we might be in trouble. So among folks that maybe grew up playing soccer and follow it casually now, I think the expectation is still, oh, we got players at Chelsea and AC Milan and Juventus. We should absolutely get out of the group. We've gotten out of the group before with guys at much smaller clubs. Then we should get out of the group no problem this time and maybe even go further. So I think, we'll see how it goes, but I think the casual fan could be in for something of a little bit of a rude awakening in Qatar. Yeah, for me, it's Landon Donovan's goal against Algeria in 2010. Obviously, the stakes were immensely high. They needed a goal to get through out of the group stage. They left it to the very last second. The goal call itself from Ian Darke, the play-by-play on that moment was iconic. There's a great video that I still go back and watch. It's probably 5 or 6 minutes long. It's a compilation of fan reactions from all across the US at these big watch parties. There's one where it's just some guy in Arkansas by himself in his basement filming, and everybody is losing their minds. And I remember watching that moment. I was at home by myself. At this point, I was just a fan. I hadn't started working in the game yet, and I lost my mind. And that was just such an iconic moment. It was something that captured the imagination of everybody in the US. Soccer fan, sports fan, regardless, everybody was into that, and everybody was like, whoa, this was awesome. And I think that's kind of the magic of the World Cup. To get ready for 2026. Obviously, the US is one of the 3 co-hosts, along with Canada and Mexico, in 2026. They are probably going to be the youngest team at this World Cup by 2 years or so on average age, blowing it out of the water in that regard. There are a lot of young players, obviously. There are a lot of talented players on this team as well. There are more younger players that are not going to be on this team that the US hopes are coming through and will be involved in 2026. And so kind of the idea for this World Cup, it's, I'm not going to say it's exactly akin to 2010 Germany, what they did in South Africa, finishing third with, I believe, the youngest team in that tournament, and then going on to win in Brazil in 2014. Germany has a higher baseline than the US does. But the idea is that, okay, this generation will kind of be bled at this tournament. They'll gain more experience, more consistency. Maybe some new guys will come along as well. And by the time 2026 rolls around and you're hosting it, you might have a real chance to make a really deep run at that tournament. I go back and forth on this all the time, actually. Tyler Adams, who plays for Leeds, is very important to the US and how they play, just in terms of the amount of ground that he covers and the defensive work that he does. If you remove him from the system, I think it would kind of fall apart. Christian Pulisic, obviously, is the US's kind of highest profile player, not having the most success at Chelsea at the moment. But when he plays well, typically the US follows. It goes back and forth between striker and center back, but I'll say striker at this point in time. There are no answers at this point as to who's even going to start. The US has had I think, had 3 goals from the striker position in 14 qualifying games. It's not great. and the system they play a 4-3-3. You know, it's heavily dependent on a striker getting chances, getting across center backs and putting the ball in the back of the net. And they haven't been able to do that with any kind of reliability or consistency. So for me, it's striker. Yunus Musah. I think, you know, incredible backstory. He was born in New York City to Ghanaian parents, moved to Italy at a young age, spent about 10 years there, and then moved to London. Played in the Arsenal Academy, I think captained an England youth national team. Eventually moves to Valencia in La Liga, makes his breakthrough there, and switches to the US. And so an incredible story just on a human level. He could have represented 4 different national teams, which is wild. But a young player getting significant minutes for a big team in Spain, progressing rapidly, lots of talent. You can kind of see, even over the last year, how his progression has gone pretty rapidly, the steps that he's made. I think he might be the US player. Maybe Gio Reyna could have an argument with this, but I think he might be the US player with the highest ceiling. I think he might go the farthest of anyone on this team. And so I'm really curious to see what he does in Qatar. Obviously, when someone's 19 years old, you never really know how things are going to go. But he's off to a good start, and I'm a big believer in his ability.
Hello, I'm James Richardson. This upcoming World Cup, what are the Athletic going to be doing about it? Well, for starters, I'll be hosting a nightly Totally Football show with the likes of Raphael Honigstein, James Horncastle and all the rest of the Totally crew. Then every morning from Qatar, wham, the Athletic Football Podcast will be at you with David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton and many more. There'll also be World Cup content from Adam Hurrey's Football Clichés podcast, Michael Cox's insightful Athletic Football Tactics podcast, and Joe Devine's Tifo podcast with all the stories that matter from Qatar. There you go, the Athletic, your essential audio companion for the upcoming World Cup.